Up above, Carl was steering Jill's invention while Jason was busy filming her running. Are you getting all this? Carl asked him, to which his cameraman replied with the snoochy boochies. Okay. Carl just stared at him for a while before it was explained it was just a word he had invented. Finally, she arrived at the slug's cave, but was surprised to see it was feeding Michael. Carl and Jason landed on top of the cave, and the camera was lowered into the cave, but still unseen by the people inside. Just then, a shadowy figure appeared on a rock on the distance. It looked somewhat like a bat, complete with pointy ears and a large wingspan. When more light appeared, it was revealed to be Kevin Smith wearing a bat costume. He jumped and flew right into the cave, but ended up splatting into the slug and sliding to the ground. After a minute-long staring contest between the two, Michael did some sort of sign language and the slug started to feed Kevin with some fruits as well. What? Having realized the big slug was actually very nice despite its menacing exterior, Carl and Jason also descended into the cave. It was at that moment that Carl finally came to the conclusion that friends are more important to have than money. He had never been with a group of people for so long who didn't disagree with him and trusted him. It was the happiest moment of his life. At sunset, everyone grew tired and went to sleep. Back at the ship, Captain Randall was still cleaning since his assistant Dante had now died. He was taking a broom from behind a cabinet when he found a radio. Since Carl had not yet paid him, he decided to call Animal Control to get that slug he was talking about under control. It took quite a while, but an airplane arrived and landed on the beach. Randall stepped out of the SS Quickstop and greeted a woman with blonde hair and a large name who introduced herself as Marshall Hilton. She wore a fedora hat and had a utility belt with a large tranquilizer gun. I promised to get that slug of yours and put it in a zoo, she said, and ran into the forest. After she stepped behind the trees, Randall smiled slyly and nudged the side of his cook Jill Hicks. Hey, that gun is as big as my Randall, that's disgusting. Can't you ever say something clean for once? Carl, Kevin, Jason, Holly, Michael, and the big slug were all sleeping quietly in the cave when they immediately heard a gunshot. Everyone woke up and saw at the entrance a tall blonde woman holding a tranquilizer. No need to be alarmed. I am here to save you from that thing. Holly and Michael, horrified at how she described their new friend, charged towards her. The gun was thrown aside and caught by Jason. Give me that, said Carl. You're not going to fire that again. At that moment, Marshall Hilton pushed the two off the cliff, but they managed to hold on to the tips. While Kevin and Jason went up to help them, the fedora-donning villain punched Carl in the stomach, got a hold of her gun, and shot the big slug 2 times. It went down after many hours. The slug was on the SS Quickstop for a trip to New York. It was then placed in a zoo where it was set to become a prime attraction in 2 weeks' time. Worried about the big slug, the View Askew crew, the name of our 5 heroes now dubbed themselves, concentrated on their plans to free their friend. Of course, they needed to film the other scenes and get quickly editing. After post-production of the film had finished, they got ready to save the big slug. Jason Mewes was told to distract Marshall Hilton by sneaking into the zoo's office and shouting profanities into the intercom. When she left her post, the rest of the View Askew crew sneaks past and arrived at the cage that was all cloaked up. Kevin checked inside and gave a thumbs up, signaling that it was the right one. He pulls out a spoon from under his coat and started trying to unlock the cage. He quickly managed to do it and opened the very large door. The big slug hopped out and Michael and Holly guided it out of the zoo. However, just like on the island, they heard a gunshot from behind them and turned around. Marshall Hilton was holding Jason by his hair and said, "I believe this foul-mouthed powder addict of yours and that slimy monster is mine," followed by throwing him over to them. Well, I guess he's not yours anymore. Before anyone could say anything else, though, policemen came roaring into the zoo entrance in their cars and screeched to a halt. "You're under arrest, Marshal Hilton, for screaming profanities at top volume into the intercom and thus making all the children in New York swear like little powder addicts." The marshal tried to explain that it wasn't her. "Were you the last person in the zoo's main office?" Hilton very unintelligently replied yes, and so was taken away by the men in blue. "Sorry for all that," the constable told the View SQ crew. "Enjoy your evening. Central Park is beautiful this time of year." "It sure is," they all replied as they watched the police car drive away. Many months later, after much promotion, their film was released in picture houses, grossing even more than the first one. Everybody was very happy with the outcome. Jason Mewes won an Academy Award for cinematography work, in which he thanked almost everybody he knew, thus becoming the longest speech in Oscar history, until being surpassed by Gear Garrison about a decade later. Kevin Smith met a comic book producer who referred to himself as Brody Bruce and offered to turn his Batman character into a series of newspaper strips and cartoons. Holly and Michael got married, bought a farm, and raised the big slug for the rest of their life. Don't you mean the rest of their lives? Now, what of our dear director, Carl Dunham? Him and his friends started their own production company where they could make any film they pleased. We finished this story by saying that a film idea that would run around Hollywood until finally being made in 2006 was actually one thought up by Carl, until he realized how stupid it was. When asked by the reporter for Variety what his next project would be, he responded with "Snakes on a Plane." "Well, all I can say is when that piece of work comes out, it will be proof that Hollywood is not what it used to be." Okay, that fanfic was very weird. I wouldn't really say it was bad. It was just kind of weird. I mean, it wasn't exactly what I expected out of a sequel to King Kong. I mean, it seemed a bit more like, I don't know, I mean, kind of like a funny sequel in a sense, or like a kid-friendly sequel. I mean, it wasn't bad though. I did enjoy reading it, but near the end it just got a little weird. I'm not saying it was bad though, it was just a little weird, and I guess I can fairly say that this probably was one of the most interesting fanfics I've ever reviewed. Now, my dear friend, that fellow with the coat, said that he wrote this back in 2006, and he did warn me that, some of the grammar wasn't really the best, and yes, it did have a few grammar issues, but I think overall it was pretty good. And it might have also been a bit hard to read because, it was in a message and not actually on fanfiction.net. But, this story, it was interesting. I wouldn't say it was bad, no. It was quite entertaining. It was just weird. It was weird, especially near the end. Not bad, though. And I mean, it was an interesting idea. It was creative. It wasn't really a rehash of the first, movie either. So, if this actually became a sequel, probably no. I can't ever imagine this being a real sequel to King Kong, but, it was an interesting idea. And I have to say kudos to you, that fellow with the coat, for writing this. It was very interesting. Huh. Yeah. Well, I'm the fanfic critic. I read it. You listen. I'm gonna watch King Kong.